A few months ago, I made a video on this channel called Vibe Coding VST plugins. A bunch of you loved this, and it's funny to see just quite how popular it's been. It's my most watched video recently, and it's seemingly really striking a chord with a lot of people who are excited about the prospects of AI in the creative space. That video, though, was very early on in my exploration in how you could use AI to build plugins using the Juice framework. And I look back on it now and I see all of the wonderful comments from people saying, oh, this is tremendous, this is super cool. And frankly, it was a bit shit. It was very difficult to repeatedly make plugins that worked. There was no consistency, and there was a lot of really big problems with that system. Needless to say, I have spent hundreds, maybe even bordering on 1,000 hours since I made that video, really refining that process. And I've come up with a system that is just revolutionary. You're going to lose your mind when you see this. So anyway, in this video, what I want to do is walk you through the process of building an entire plugin from scratch using my new and updated approach, which I call the Plugin Freedom System. So without further ado, let's jump right in and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. What I'm going to be showing you today is exactly how I went about building plugins like this just conversationally, without having to write a single line of code. The one we're going to be building today is this one, Flutterverb. Of course, all of these knobs actually do work. They all control. We do all of this conversationally. So let me just give you a quick preview of what this guy does. The idea was to create a reverb that has distortion and tape wobble on only the actual reverb sound. So if we bring this in, here's our actual reverb. Then the actual wet signal can have like tape wobble added to it. We've also then got a filter here that allows us to shape the effect, the reverb, free from the dry. Kind of nice, turn it on and off. And we've also got this drive knob here that, frankly, if I were to put more time into this, I would make it so that the drive knob auto balances volume. But it's nice because it allows us to have that little bit of more warmth and saturation on that reverb itself. And then we can go down. And then this little switch down here allows us to make it so that this filter controls everything. Very nice. You can see we've got a working VU meter. Very nice. We're about to create from scratch the entire Flutterverb reverb. Now, you will find a link in the description down below to the GitHub repository. You can absolutely just get started, download it and start playing. But I do recommend that you watch this video through once, just so that you fully understand the exact workflow as I intended it to be used. Please do reach out or comment down below if you find any bugs, any feature requests. Also, you'll see at the end of the video, I am actually launching a community for 47 bucks a month for the next week, where you can come, and every week I'm going to be doing Q&A calls so you can get actual support on your AI-assisted plugin development workflows too. So without further ado, let's jump right in and I'm going to show you what we're talking about. So I've built the Plugin Freedom System using all of the latest and greatest features at our disposal with Claude Code. And this right here is the directory. I'm going to upload the Git repo for you to be able to try this out yourself, but it doesn't really look like much. You'd almost think, let me just get rid of this for a second. You'd almost think that this wasn't capable of creating kick-ass plugins, but I promise you it is. So the way that I do this is, while I do have Windsurf open as my IDE so that I can actually look at the individual files, I run all of this using Warp, which is my favorite terminal plugin. So I'm actually just going to go to the folder, which is the Plugin Freedom System. And all I'm going to do is load up Claude in dangerously skip permissions mode. I think I also talked about this in the last video. Just allows Claude to just do its job and I can keep my hands off to some extent. Now, some of the issues that I had in the previous workflow was that there wasn't really a consistent system, and there was just far too much deviance, if that's the word. There was far too much deviation, maybe deviance too, far too much deviation from consistency and idempotency in the system. So what I've done is I've created a really structured approach to creating plugins that really starts with a couple of basic slash commands. Now, when we want to come up with a new plugin, I kind of like the idea of coming up with a high level and what it looks like before I actually start creating the code for it. So the first command that we're going to run is just /dream. Now, I could say something else after that, but just to demonstrate exactly how this system works, I'm just going to run dream so that you can see what happens. You may or may not be familiar with the BMAD workflow, which is just a super kick-ass system for developing stuff, websites and stuff created by a guy called Brian, I think his name is. Really great thing. I'll put a video linking to his channel. But I got very inspired by that workflow, the approach, which as you can see here, I created a system where it asks prompts. One of the best things I think about AI is allowing it to have a range of options that of course it can go and create all sorts of different ideas off of that, but to program everything so that it is consistent and you can ask, it can ask you questions as we go along. So as you can see, we've got a few options here. Do we want to create a new plugin idea, improve an existing plugin, create a UI mockup, create an aesthetic template? We're not going to look at 2 through 5 yet. I just want to go straight into number 1. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to press 1 because we want to create a new plugin idea. So this is going to start, maybe you're familiar with the new Claude Code skills feature, but I'll show you in a second what that is and where this is pulling from. But what this is going to do is it's going to ask me, what do I want to build? So I'm just going to give it a basic idea of what I imagine this plugin to be, and you'll see how this transitions into a really rather exciting ideation workflow. So I'm just going to use my Mac Whisper to just transcribe this. So I'm going to press Option. I would like to build, for some reason it's not working. What a bummer. Okay, so I'm just going to type it in here then. I want to build a reverb that the wet signal has wow and flutter and is tape driven and analog sounding. The plugin will have only a few parameters, but will provide me with a nice and easy way to add a textured and deep reverb, that's not maybe the right word, textured and exciting reverb sound. Okay, so that's not really enough context to go and build a whole plugin. So you're going to see what's going to happen now is Claude is going to take that information and it's going to think about that, and it's going to ask me a few targeted questions. And I love this Ask User Question tool that we can use in Claude Code, where it presents these questions in terminal like this. This is just so nice, such a good UX experience. So let's see. First and foremost, it wants to ask about the parameters. What should the core parameters be? Mix, decay, wow, flutter. Mix, size, decay, wow, flutter. Mix, decay, wow, flutter, tone. I'm just going to go ahead with mix, size, decay, and wow, flutter. In fact, what I'll do is I'll just copy and paste that, and I'm going to go down here to type something, and I'm going to say, and tone, using a DJ style filter, you know, where it's like at 12 o'clock it's nothing, and then you can filter it up. And I've actually built something like that already, so I can actually get it to reference that. So check, let me just go in here, and I'm just going to pull this up. I quite like here in the gain knob, so I'm just going to copy and paste the path of that. Check for implementation on this filter. Nice. Okay, so next question. Let me just make sure that I select the right one. Yes. Okay, what range for the wow and flutter? I think we should go for extreme. We should be able to make it really, really strange. Reverb type, spring reverb, plate reverb, room, hall. Let's do plate reverb. And then usage, primary use case, glue and vintage character on full mix, add space. I'm just going to say, I keep thinking that I can transcribe, but I can't. So musical elements like pianos, guitars, flutes, vocals, etc. Yeah, whatever. So I'm going to submit my answers, And it's now going to take those answers and it's going to have a little think, what else does it need? So this is a really cool spot, is that at any given point, I don't want the AI to assume I've given it enough information. So right now it's saying, do you want to finalize this and move on to the next stage, or ask me 4 more questions? Or would I like to give some more context? So I'm actually going to say, ask me 4 more questions. What I love about this is it's not the same questions every time. The questions will be specific to what I've already said. So you'll see in a second, we're going to get 4 more questions that further dive in to what I'm talking about. So what decay time range should the plugin support? I think we should be able to go, let's just say like 0.1 seconds to 10 seconds. So, you know, big range. Nice. Size behavior. How should the size parameter affect the sound? I think it should be room dimensions, kind of like you would expect on a reverb. Should wow and flutter affect the dry signal or only wet? Let's say, actually, option to have just wet or also dry, or wet and dry. We'll just say like toggleable. Inspiration. So I don't really even know. Let's see. I love how it gives this little description. So classic studio plate, clean algorithmic. Maybe we should go for a clean algorithmic implementation, seeing as we're then adding this character on top. So I'm going to submit my answers. I'm probably going to say let's do 4 more questions just to really dial this down, and then we'll move on to the next section. And you can do this as many times as you want. I've set it up so that I think after 3 rounds of questions, it kind of nudges you and it says, I've probably got enough context now so we can move on. But here we go. This is important stuff. So how should the DJ style filter control? Like a gain knob, center is full, left removes highs, right removes lows. Brightness, darkness, tilt. I'm just going to again say, check in, I already implemented this. This gain knob is just like a nice simple plugin that I can reference for things that I know work. So should the tape characteristics include saturation and warmth? Let's actually add, adjustable. So we'll add drive and saturation to it. Nice. Modulation mode. Should the toggle for dry, what should the toggle for dry wet modulation be? I mean, this sounds kind of confusing. I'm confused. So dry wet modulation, simple 2-state toggle. Oh no, there we go. We'll just do a button then. So plugin name, let's go, flutter verb. I mean, come on, that's perfect. So submit. I'm now ready to move on to the next stage. So it's going to have a little look here. It's actually reading the code from gain knob to find that specific answer. So I'm just going to say, yes, finalize it. I'm going to see what's going to happen now is we're going to move on to the next stage of the ideation workflow. And it's creating in my system a new folder for Flutterverb. So if we go in here, you can see that under plugins, it's now created Flutterverb. There's nothing in it yet. It's created this ideas folder, but just in a second, you'll see that inside of there, it's going to create the necessary files to begin this process. And another super important thing is that I think when you're working with AI and you're building these systems, you want to have things be repeatable enough, but dynamic enough so that you can use them for a wide variety of use cases, but that they follow the same formula. Because later down the line, when you have other parts of the system that are going to be consuming the information created earlier on, you want to make sure that it follows the same pattern. So you can see here, creative brief. This is the file it's created. So it explains the vision of the thing. If I make it so that we can actually preview this, it's listed the parameters with the default position, the range, UI concept. Now this, interestingly, we're actually going to move into the next stage and we're probably going to overwrite this. But it's got a bunch of information in here, technical notes. Again, all of this stuff is going to be improved upon at these later dates, but this creative brief is the jumping off point. And you'll notice that for every plugin, so let's go into tape age here, the ideas creative brief file follows exactly the same formula. So that's just to point that out. I'm going to close this up for a second. You can see it's also now created, this is fucking crucial, so cool. a continue here file. One of the worst situations is when you're in a chat, you're vibing out, everything is going perfectly, and then all of a sudden you run out of context and it compacts and then it forgets everything and it stops behaving. Also, I don't ever want to have to say, yo, where are we up to? Please create a file. So at every stage, not only does it create the necessary files, but it's also created a handoff document by default. So this continue here file, if we go and look in here, has now told us when we last updated that. It's easier to look at it here. It's told us the stage we're in, ideation. It's told us what's completed, and then it also says what the next steps are. So very nice. What's cool here is I can actually just close this and let's not continue. Right now it's saying, do you want to continue with the UI mockup? Which I do. Do I want to start implementation? Probably not, seeing as we don't actually have any UI for this. But I just want to demonstrate how this continue here works. I'm just going to clear my context. Oh, in the past, that would have been absolute heresy. I'm also just going to close Mac Whisper because it's clearly not being a good boy. There we go. So what I can now do is I can run the continue prompt, and all I have to do is reference what plugin it is. So I think we called it Flutter Verb. I'm going to do this. And what that's going to do, you'll see here, is it's going to look into the folder of that specific plugin and try and find the... It's launching a skill called context resume, and it's going to try and find that continue here file. So you can see here it's now reading that. It's going to look again, there we go. It doesn't have a handoff file. It does. It actually does. So there seems to be a little bit of a confusion here. It will find it. It will find it in a sec. That's one of the problems with all of these skills things is it does eventually... it does present to you issues that you do need to refine. It's just going to do a few more tool calls before it realizes that it is actually ready. So nice, here we go. Found it. Flutter Verb has an ideation handoff. Very good. Technical references, great. So what I want to now do is to create a mockup for it. So I'm going to press number 1, and this is going to launch the next skill set, which is the UI mockup skill. This is revolutionary. One of the worst things about creating plugins with my previous system was that the UIs sucked. They just looked terrible. And I don't know how many of you tried out my system or even just tried creating things with Juice anyway, but the default look of a Juice plugin is just trash. It really is such trash. It looks horrible. So I really wanted to create a system where I could create really high-end UIs. And you're going to see how this is implemented. It's really, really great. So straight away it's asking, would you like to start the Flutter Verb UI design? Apply some aesthetics. We're going to look at aesthetics later on. This one particularly, the vintage hardware aesthetic, is very cool. I'm going to show you how we create those, but I don't actually want to create an aesthetic first. This time I want to just start from scratch. So I'm going to say start from scratch and submit answers. And now we're going to go into the next round of sort of questioning that will allow us to create not just the design system for it, but we're going to be creating actual HTML files. There's a really cool new API that I discovered in the Juice framework called the Web View API that allows you to, instead of creating things using the default look and feel setup, which is, in my opinion, just a bit shit and definitely harder to implement great UIs without knowing a bunch of coding. I'm not a coder. I'm a systems builder, but I'm not a coder. So it's very important to me to create systems that allow for me to create really great UIs. And I've done that with the way that we approach this. So first it says, how should the 6 knobs be arranged? Mix, size, decay, wow, flutter, tone, drive with toggle. Should it be all horizontal row, signal flow layout? So left to right showing reverb path, grid with visual centerpiece. I'm going to say 2 rows of 3 knobs. It's a bit confused here. So I'm actually going to copy and paste this down here. And I'm going to say 1 row of knobs for reverb. It's much nicer when your transcription tool works, but I always have to restart my laptop when it does what it's just doing right now. So actually we're going to say size, decay, mix. Nice. And then, there we go. And then below that, another row. Ooh, another row with wow, flutter, drive, or maybe we'll say wow, flutter, drive, tone, and tone with toggle. Cool. Boom. So tape visual. What vintage tape visual element do you want? Do we want spinning tape reels? Do we want both reels and a VU meter? Classic bouncing needle. I'm going to add a VU meter in. Nice. I'm going to say that. What color palette fits the tape character? Warm sepia cream. Aged paper feel. I'm definitely going to go for that. I love the sound of that. 60s tape machine feel. What knob style? Large vintage brass knobs, small precise metal knobs. Let's do chicken head pointer knobs. I think that, yeah, that's like a kind of Fender amplifier look. So it's going to take that. It's going to ask me it's going to ask me if I want 4 more questions, which I do. So wow Flutter as 1 parameter. Should I split it into 2 separate controls or keep it as 1? Maybe we should keep it as, yeah, we'll keep it as 1 knob. So yeah, I know that we've just got it a little confused, but it's going to reconcile that in a second. It's probably going to ask a few more questions to check that out. We could actually maybe tell it in a second that maybe that wow Flutter knob should just be called like age or something. So let's see what it says. So where should the VU meter be positioned? Centered at top for sure. Size, so 600 by 400, 500 by 350. Let's do wide. Toggle, flip switch for sure, up, down, typography. Okay, let's do vintage tech, mechanical feel. Nice, submit. So I actually do want to get a little more context. So when it asks now, do you want me to ask you 4 more questions? I'm going to go for the let me add more context first option, because I feel like we do need to just clarify what I said about those knobs. So the wow Flutter single knob versus wow and Flutter as separate knobs is preferred. We should probably just call this age, and it should be a knob that makes the tape feel increase. Yeah, fine, we'll do that. Cool, so now we're just adding that little bit more context in. And I think one of the things that I really wanted to create with this system is I'm a creative guy, you know, like I can come up with ideas, but at the end of the day, I can be much more creative with somebody else when we're prompting each other and we're asking each other questions like, how do you envision this? Like, what are you thinking? Tell me about what kind of thoughts are there. And so I really wanted to create a system where I could dial down what it was that I wanted to build before I built it. And again, that's not to say that I can't come up with ideas on my own, but to have this kind of structured approach, like having a kind of scribe who's sat beside you and they ask just the right questions. Let's just do 4 more questions to really dial this in. But having somebody who's sat beside you, who can listen to what you're saying, who can take all of your rambly, crazy thoughts and just package them into something that can be used later on, I think it's just massively invaluable. So right now, we've got a few more questions. I'm going to leave it with this one now. So how should the VU meter needle respond? So we'll say output level, sure. Actually, I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say output level. It should follow similar design to, and I've got another plugin that I implemented this in. Sometimes it's easier just to say, we'll just do copy path, just to say copy something. If you've already built something that you like, that's what I like about this, is that you can just reference it. So VU meter aesthetic style. Let's do warm glow behind meter face vintage analog. Yeah, for sure. Title. Let's do above VU meter. Nice. Background. Smooth matte. Ooh, okay. So subtle vintage paper texture. Let's say sepia cream color, but a little textured. And then we'll just say like. Nice, here we go. So again, I'm just copying. I like what I did with the Tape Age plugin. Tape Age was just like a really nice tape saturation plugin that I've created. Maybe I'll show you that at the end of this video, which might actually be the beginning of this video, because I think what I'm going to do is I at the end of this video, I don't know why I'm even explaining this to you right now, but I'm going to show you what we've built today. So you've already seen it at this point. Nice. Okay, so now it says, are you ready to generate the mockup with the tape age style VU meter and texture? Yes, I am. So now what it's going to do is it's going to then take us to the next stage of the mockup skill. And this is now going to create the HTML file. And I started talking about this before, but by default, when you create UIs with Juice, you use something called look and feel, which uses like Flexbox, and I personally couldn't really do too well with it. Maybe if I went and really learned more, but I'm very familiar with HTML and CSS and JavaScript. You know, I think one of the things that makes this approach so great is that I wanted to use languages or approaches that I'm familiar with in other domains. So that's why we create the UIs with HTML, so we can be really specific, kind of like we're designing a website. And CSS is just so it's so flexible that I think it's really great. You'll notice right now that the first step, it says now generating the YAML spec. This YAML spec is really cool because while the HTML file that we're going to create will show us the plugin, when we then go to implement it at a later date, this testy HTML file has no Juice related code to it. I tried to keep this as lightweight as possible, and we don't generate any of the code that we're going to actually implement with until we've actually settled on it, because it's quite likely that this V1 UI is not going to be perfect. I can almost guarantee that we're going to see it and we're going to be like, dude, there's a knob over the fucking VU meter, or the text is not aligned. So what we do is we first create this spec, and if we go and have a little look at what this spec is that it's creating, let's go into Flutterverb. You can see that in the mockups in the ideas folder, it's created first here this YAML file, which describes all of the colors and everything that's needed. So boom, there we go. It's now created this, and we can play around with it, and we can say, okay, well, no, these knobs are not behaving right. So what I like to do is I'm just going to take a screenshot of this, and we're going to go back to Claude, and you can see that Claude has now said, what do you want to do? Check alignment, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to do provide refinements. So I'm now going to paste in that screenshot, and this is actually where it's really irritating that I don't have Mac Whisper working. Let's see if we can make it work. Please, please. Hello. We're going to work? Okay, so we do actually need to pull this up. Maybe we could even... Oh, nice. Okay, so I'm just going to do this. So I'm going to say, just make sure that we can see it. Let's open up the screenshot. Oh, I shouldn't have full screened this. So let's just make this a little to the left. I also should undo. Okay. So a couple of things are completely wrong about this. One, the knobs, as you can see, are overlaying the VU controls. The knobs need to exist in a far better position lower down so that they better take up the UI space. Second of all, the title, Flutterverb, the accessibility of the readability of this is completely whack. The color is way too similar to the background, creating a very big issue trying to read the text. We can also see that we have a problem with the knobs in that the sort of line that's supposed to indicate which direction the knob is pointed at is currently implemented wrong and is on like a different pivot point than is necessary. Please actually check. And now this is where it's very handy to be able to check other things. Say tape age and what was the other one? Tape age. What are my other plugins that I've created? Let's have a little look here. Driver, clap machine. I guess I didn't create them in this realm, but we'll just do that. So we'll just say check tape age for how knobs should be created. Also, I think you should approach the background colors more like tape age rather than this cream background. Also, please don't have percentages. I don't want to see the actual value readouts of the knobs. these positions should be dictated purely by the direction that the knob indicator is pointing. Cool, so now I can do this, and what it's going to do, let's just go back and actually open the plugin again. Maybe I don't want to have this in full screen mode. I thought it just looked nice for us. But let's go in here, mockups. And that's the key of this iterative approach. If we go in here, oh fuck, what did I just do? Stop live server. Okay, there we go. Open with live server, and it's opening it here. So we can see that, as I said, like this line, that's not where it should be pivoting from. This is broken. Let's see if the switch works. Okay, the switch does. That's very nice. I like that. This seems to work, but yeah, we can see that it's just not quite right. So let's go back and see what Claude is doing. Claude is checking it out. You can see the issues. Knob structure is wrong. Nice, not a single div. And what's cool as well is you're going to see as we run into more problems, we can actually introduce these problems that we solve as context that Claude always follows. There was another issue that I ran into with these systems is it's like it's all very well fixing something once. But if you run into that problem again at a later date, that's not the AI's fault, that's your fault for not properly documenting it and introducing that as a repeatable knowledge for the system. So you'll see how we implement that later on. It's really very cool. I'm particularly proud of my approach that I did with that. So let's have a little look. Okay, this looks better for sure. I really, really appreciate that. I like the look of the knobs. That's very nice. Let's just take another screenshot and let's check this fader works or this toggle works. That does. Now we're going to do one more. Okay, so as you can see, we have a lot better of an approach, but the problem is still the knob positioning doesn't really make sense. It's still covering up the flutter reverb and there's not enough space actually on the panel for it to make sense. I think that we should actually make the plugin narrower but taller. Therefore, we need for the VU meter to be less wide, but we should just make it maybe, if it's currently 800 wide by 500 tall, I don't remember, it should be 600 wide by 700 tall, or maybe whatever. I can't fully think what it would need to be, but it needs to be narrower and taller. Also, I would like it for the left edge of the size knob and the left edge of the age knob to perfectly align with the left edge of the VU meter. Exactly the same with the right edge of the mix knob and the right edge of the tone knob need to perfectly align with the right edge of the VU meter. This then begs the question of what do we do with the modulation mode toggle? I think that we should now add that as a horizontal toggle below the tone knob. It's okay then to have a little bit of blank space underneath the drive and the age knobs because the toggle only exists for the tone knob. So increase the vertical height, decrease the width so that all of these parameters can fit nicer. Also, we need a little bit more space between the bottom of the title and the tops of the knobs. I know this is kind of like, it seems a bit of an iterative process that could be a bit irritating. We could absolutely go in if we wanted to and adjust the CSS and the HTML in here. If you're good with code and you could do this yourself, by all means do it. The only thing is that the important part is that it matches the YAML file. So you're going to see in a sec, it's actually going to then make sure that the YAML file relates. So it's going to go in and it's going to create V3 now. Okay, nice. It's now created the next version. Let's take a look. We're almost there. Let's do one more refinement here. I'm going to take a screenshot and I'm going to paste it in. And actually, one thing that can be very helpful as well is I have a plugin or something I use called Screen Brush, and it allows me to annotate things. So I could actually put these in a rectangle and say, move these down. And I can actually do this. I can also do an arrow. Oh, that's not what we want. And do two arrows here and say, make taller. Yep, that's fine. And we also need one more arrow to say add more space below the title. So I'm going to do this. This is what I like to do with the screenshots as well, is it just makes it a little easier to then go in and tell it what it is that I'm talking about. I'm going to paste that in there. So close. The only issue is that it still needs to be taller because of the fact that the knobs are still covering up the title. Make it a fair bit taller so that we can fit all of it on in exactly the way that I've annotated in the picture. Nice. We'll just leave it at that. Hopefully this is the final one. It usually takes me like 3 or 4 iterations for the UI before we actually settle on what the winner is. But I do love that you can try it out. I think it's really helpful to actually have a mock-up. You can see the tone knob here defaults. Even if you double click it, it snaps back to the middle. Really, really nice functionality there. We've got this little toggle working, drive, age, size, decay. Okay, so I'm assuming that V4 is going to be the one. Let's see what it does. Okay, it's created the V4 UI mockup. Let's try it out, see what it looks like. Okay, so we're still not quite there. So we need to do one more thing, and we'll say toggle still off the edge. And then we'll just say, yeah, I mean, this looks a lot better. So let's just move that out of the way for a second. And this is the final iteration. Okay, we are so nearly there. You've absolutely smashed it. The only thing is the plugin still needs to be taller because as you can see, the mod mode toggle is off of the edge. Just increase the vertical height a little bit more so that we have a bit more blank space at the bottom of the plugin. And then you're good to go. I'm not going to say and then you're good to go because I don't want it to think that I want it to continue. So let's just see. This really is the final one. Come on, fingers crossed, guys. Okay, so it's almost there. I'm probably just going to cut ahead in this video because this almost seems a bit annoying to have to keep showing you this. Okay, I'm just going to say that. Make it 650 pixels tall so we have a little more space below the toggle. It's just that final thing. This is the last bit that needs to be adjusted before we can then move on to that next stage. But I can tell you one thing. Doing this now, getting the mock-up to spec now, saves you so much time. I can't tell you the amount of effort that I put into in the previous system trying to fix the UI of a plugin after it had already been built, which was a terrible order. Also, because of the fact that I'd never really gave it much guidance, oftentimes the plugins that it would create without this new system that I've made, the knobs would just be, as you saw in the first version of this, completely on top of each other, and there would be no aesthetic appreciation, no understanding on the part of the AI in what it should look like. This is something that I want to actually improve and refine even more. Ideally, I don't want to have to do 5 or 6 iterations of this, but as I continue to work on the plugin freedom system, one of my goals is to just really refine the efficiency and the effectiveness of Claude. So part of that is going to be creating more and more rules that you'll see moving on. And these rules will just really help to make sure that from the get-go, it asks maybe a checklist. It's like, is it possible that any of these knobs are overlapping? Boom, there we go. I'm super happy with this. I like this a lot. We could work on it some more, but I actually just want to continue now. So just checking that out. Really love it. So I'm going to say, this is perfect. I absolutely love it. Just quick reminder, you also need to create the YAML file. I noticed that you didn't. And then get back to me on the UI mockup skill workflow. You shouldn't have to say those kind of things. This is clearly just like a slight deviation in how Claude is following the skill that I created for it. Again, these are subtle refinements that I'm going to put in. I would like for it to continuously create the YAML files, but I'm actually kind of glad that it didn't in this case because of the fact that it would have taken us more time. And for the sake of demonstrating this video, I'm happy with this. I like this. You know, we could probably make it narrower if we wanted to, but for now, I'm pretty chilled with that. You can see that it's creating that YAML file with all of the relevant information. The next stage, and I'm sure the astute amongst you will be thinking, okay, but the creative brief that we made at the beginning maybe doesn't really align anymore. So that's where this is very important. We now need to run the run design sync validation. So I'm going to click 1 and it's going to check the alignment. So what it's going to now do is it's going to look at that creative brief and it's going to see how our mockup differs from it. And this is important because while the creative brief was a great place to start, I would say that the mockup is actually more of a source of truth for what the plugin should look like, and also what even controls there are. If you remember, we did have a wow knob and a filter knob, and so those are going to be listed in the those are going to be listed on that UI, and they're not going to be in the creative brief. So as you can see, it's now going through, it's running the design sync validation. And in theory, if it's going to behave like we hope it will, it's going to go in and actually update this creative brief. It's going to change it. Let's see if it's already done. No, I don't think it has. But let's see, like, so Flutter, if we go here to controls, oh, I guess it already did update it. We can see here now, parameter spec is missing. This is a key thing as well, because we want to have what I've called in this contracts. These are immutable contracts. This is so crucial for as we start going through the later build stages, that we don't ever lose context of exactly what is being built, the exact parameters, where they should be, what their ranges are. So you can see that it's now created this, we had the creative brief, cool. We have the YAML file, but then it's also created this parameter spec. Now this is consumed later on, and this is information that the entire process needs to understand what the DSP is of that control, what the actual UI style of control, the skew factor, defaults, whatever. The specific type, so this mod mode, that switch, it needs to be a Boolean. We don't want it to suddenly implement it as, I don't know, like a knob. And so you can see here, it's also layout structure. It's fully describing exactly what it looks like. And this is just super helpful. You can see that it's even added in a little bit more description. Very nice. Let's go back and see what it's done. Now it's just checking for any scope changes. So this is exactly what I was saying. It's now looking for, in any way, if the parameter spec deviates from our creative brief. It's using an MCP server that I use religiously called sequential thinking, which you can see here. It said, okay, I need 4 thoughts here to really just think about this and compare. I like using this more so than just the inbuilt Claude code extended thinking, because I also like to be able to see this. It's kind of helpful. So sometimes if it like generates 15 thoughts, I love to just sit there and watch to see what it's thinking. Great. Okay. So let's see what it said. Design brief is aligned. Cool. Everything makes sense. We've evolved it from the 700 by 400. Let's just check to see for sure that the creative brief says 700. Nice. It's updated all of it. We've got the VU meter, visual feedback. This is great. Okay, so what I'm going to now do is I'm actually just going to make sure. I need to make sure, actually. Wait. Did you follow... Again, this is something that will be made concrete in a later version. I just need to still verify that this all works. UI mockup skill, exactly. I.e. committing and creating the handoff docs. So you won't need to do this, but if you do notice that it didn't seemingly create a continue here file, and you are watching this, there we go. You want to make sure every now and then that it is following the workflow. So this, okay, this is interesting. Because it's still in the design sync skill validation, I need to actually add this as a note, which will just say that design sync when complete should route back to UI mockup skill to maintain flow. Okay, I'm going to fix that at a later date. Nice. So ran design sync, lovely. So what it's going to do is it's going to look in that UI mockup skill, and one of the things it needs to do is to commit all of the changes that it's made. So if we go in here and we look at the commit history, we can see that actually it hasn't committed any of these things. So let's have a little look here. So design sync. Let's have a little look. Okay, this is actually something kind of cool. we can save as an aesthetic template. I'm not going to do this now because it will take a little bit of time to do. But what it will do is, instead of giving the exact parameters, like where the knobs are, it will extract the conceptual basis for the UI design, and it will then go and put it into what's called an aesthetic file, which we could actually apply later on. You saw that earlier when it said, do you want to create the UI from scratch or to follow a refinement? Maybe I'll make another video about that. So let's just say, please finish the UI mockup workflow and commit and create necessary handoff files. Again, this should not be something that you would have to do, but I'm still refining this, and I just want to make sure that everything is ready to rock and roll. Because if we go in here and we have a look, we can see that while it did create a continue here file, what is the next stage? This was still the ideation one. We need it to now update this. And so if we said next step, it's going to try and create the mockup. We've already created that. Oh, of course. Sorry, I needed to finalize and create the implementation. So that's the core thing, is that the test UI, this was actually my fault because I didn't actually continue with the workflow. But what we now need it to do is to create this test HTML file. We need to make out of that the full actual HTML production version that will be used, as well as then creating the C++ code and all of the necessary files for this to actually work. So these are going to be created in the mockups folder. You can see here we're at now V6. We've got V6 UI HTML and UI YAML. So what is, oh, there we go, test. So this now is the HTML file that also has if we go in here and we search for juice, this should now have the appropriate names that are going to be created with this. So here is the plugin editor file. Again, we don't really need to look too much into this, but I just want to show you, if you're interested, you're curious and looking to see what is created. It's creating all of these specific files that are then going to be used in stage 6, which is then actually implementing the UI into the plugin that we have built. Okay, nice. It's now created the updated handoff file, the continue here file that will allow us to now move on to the next step. It's also now committing all of the files. Very nice. So you can see here it's creating the commit, which is feet flutter verb, complete UI mockup. Very nice. Lovely. Okay, we're ready to move on to the next workflow. We've now actually completed everything in the dream space. So what I'm going to do is just clear my context now. We're going to start from scratch, and I'm going to do implement, and then I'm just going to reference the file. So what did it call? Flutter verb. So this is going to start the implementation plugin workflow, which is where we're actually going to start building this plugin. Now this process is, I think it's a 7-step process, which is number 1, research. Let me go in here and show you what the steps are. So Claude, we're going to go into skills, plugin workflow, references. So stage 0 is research. Now what it's going to do is it's going to take all of the reference from our, let's just pull it up so we can have a little look here. It's going to take all of the information that is needed from the creative brief and the parameter spec, and it's going to go and then research all of the things needed to actually build that. So there's a really comprehensive thing that's going to create a plan or a file called architecture. And the architecture file you can see here, starting workflow at stage 0. Yeah, that makes sense. So what it's going to do is it can't find the architecture file, which is good. That's what we want. We want for it to then go and search the internet for exactly how to make this thing work. So it's going to run for a little bit. You can see it's doing some thinking about what it needs to actually research. And then once that's done, it's actually doing 15 steps, which seems a little excessive. Okay, so it's launching some web searches now, looking into the Juice DSP APIs for reverbs in 2025, professional plate reverb plugin parameter ranges. It's going to look for all sorts of things that are helpful and necessary for us to go and build this. This was another one of the other issues that I had in the previous system, is that I think I began the video you saw before, there was a research phase, but the information wasn't really used very efficiently. What ended up happening was that we would get a bunch of crap from different places, you know, like GitHub repos and scientific papers, but it wasn't really synthesized in an efficient way that could then be consumed later on to actually take that architecture, decide upon a specific route, and then make a plan. So this 15-stage thought process includes thinking, okay, well, what would I need for this? And then when it comes up with that thought, it then goes and does a web search. So you can see here, it's now actually reading the gain knob, because obviously before I mentioned that the gain knob had a feature that I liked. It's then going to go and read that. Now you can see that it's found the exact filter implementation. So maybe it's going to actually go and have a little look to see saturation, wave shaper, soft clipping, all of these kind of pieces of implementation. Let's have a little look to see what its next thought is going to be. This really is a fun part of the process, because you get to, if you want to, stop it and steer it. I'm not going to steer it in this case because everything seems to be running on board. But I could also just jump in here and I could say, like, search for more implementations of plugin examples like FabFilter, you know, and I could put that in and it's going to then slot that into the research phase without me actually having to stop it, which is really great. So you can see after 12 thoughts, I guess it shaved off from 15. It decided 12 was actually enough, that it's going to create the architecture file based on all of its research. So this will probably take a couple of minutes or so because it will have found a bunch of information that then needs to be formatted. If we go in here to assets, into the architecture format. So here is the template for what it's going to look like. We have a little look here. You can see it's going to break down the core components with the specific juice classes, the processing chain, the parameter mapping, algorithm details. Again, this is just a template, so it will be filled in. So let's close this up and have a little look. It's not made yet. I'm going to give it probably a minute or two and then it will be done. Cool. So the architecture file has now been created. If we go in here and have a look, we can see the Flutterverb architecture file has broken down all of the things that are needed. So here is the reverb engine, the wow LFO generator, the flutter LFO generator, the pitch modulation line, tape saturation, DJ style filter, dry wet mixer. So it's found the specific juice classes necessary for them. All of the configuration. Here's the processing chain. So input, capture the dry signal, plate reverb. Then it goes through all of this good stuff. Back out, parameter mapping. It explains exactly what those parameters would do. All sorts of great stuff here. What's this? This is algorithm details describing exactly how it works. Special considerations. This is a really useful part as well. Because we want to ensure that it never goes and does things that will fuck up the CPU, or it doesn't want to do just stupid things that you should never do with Juice. So we'll have a look in a second at how I dynamically introduce into it every single time these Juice critical patterns. So everything it ever does or thinks about, it must follow these patterns. Let's go back and have a little look. Nice. So we can see that it has updated the relevant files. It's created the continue here file. You could now press stage 1, continue. But I do recommend when you're using this, as tempting as it is to keep it going in the same chat, I would always recommend that you clear the context. That's why I created the continue here thing, is because we don't really want to pollute, should we say, the chat with information that's not necessary. It's already documented everything. So what I'm going to do is just say continue Flutterverb, and it's now going to jump in and it's going to continue on to the next stage, which will be planning. This is where we're going to take the architecture file. You can see it's reading the continue here file here. Let's go and have a look to see what it even says. So plugins, Flutterverb, continue here. The next stage is planning. So calculating complexity and then creating an implementation plan for it. So you can see here that it's going to read this. This is actually something I need to also add in here. Let's just say when running continue here in the actual plugin workflow state, it needs to ignore the continue here file in the ideas folder, or just delete it once stage 0 is complete. This is my notes about things that need to be adjusted. Lovely. So we can see that planning, this is the next stage. Ready to proceed? Yes. So what it's going to do is it's going to look at that architecture file, and then it's going to consider how many stages should this be broken down into. Sometimes if you're doing something very simple, like let's say, for example, a gain knob, you know, that doesn't need multiple stages. It's pretty simple in implementation. But because this is a relatively complex plugin that has various kind of stages, we've got the reverb, we've got the saturation, we've got the filter, it needs to break that down into phases to ensure that it does the best job. So you can see here it's running a quick test to make sure that these files exist. If they didn't, it blocks and you can't continue. This is something as well that I can't tell you how irritating it is when you're building things with AI, where you spent all of the time creating a specific document, or you think that the document exists, but it never actually wrote the file. And therefore it runs and it doesn't actually verify that that thing that you think exists, and therefore it does a terrible job. So what I wanted to bake into this was, like, all throughout the process, verification of contracts. And as I said, these contracts are things that prevent, or should I say, they prevent drift as we continue on. So you can see here it's now created the plan. Let's have a little look to see what its plan idea is. I guess it hasn't saved it yet. Oh, ideas plan. There we go. So we can see that stage 1 is completed with the planning. The phases it's actually going to do is 1 for the reverb, 2 for the modulation, 3 for saturation and filter, 4 for the mod mode routing. Nice. Okay, so let us now go back here. This is another thing I forgot to mention, the plugins. This is where it archives all of the plugins that you have working on. And you can see here that it keeps track of the status of where the plugins are and also the version number. We'll have a look at the version number once we start getting into improvements. I wanted to make it so that you actually build the plugin fully before you start making crazy changes. So we have the implement workflow we're doing, but we have a separate improve workflow that then goes in and can make changes. And when you make an improvement, it bumps the version depending on whether it's a minor, major, or whatever, blah, 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 blah. So you can see here, tape age, that's the wrong plugin, go down here. Drive verb, that's not the one either. Flutter verb. So this one, you can see it's explaining what we've done. Lifecycle timeline, it's explaining right here, this is what we've done so far. We haven't had any issues. Very good. Okay, so now it wants to continue to stage 2. We can just verify up here that it created the continue here file. Yep. So what am I going to do? I'm going to clear it. Now this is really, really cool. So let's do continue. And I'm actually just going to find the continue here file for Flutter verb, just so that we make sure that it actually does the right file rather than me referencing the plugin. These processes, such as actually implementing the DSP, implementing the UI, these processes take up a lot of context. And so what I don't ever want is to waste too much of the context of this main window when things could be done neatly without having to read a bunch of crap. So let's say, yes, continue. I'm curious to see if it just continues with the actual plugin workflow like we hope it should. Let's see. I might have to actually tell it to. But what I was going to say is these stages, lovely. Foundation Shell, DSP, and GUI, these actually have their own sub-agents. And so that means that these jobs, such as setting up the project view structure, implementing the parameter bindings, these have their own agents. And these agents have their own task lists that explains exactly to them. If we go and hit agents, the foundation agent, this is its spec. So it knows what it should do and what not to do. It knows very important context about what it's like, what it should never, ever, ever do. It gives step-by-step instructions on exactly how to complete that task, which means that when we invoke the plugin or the foundation agent, our main chat window, Claude, then goes and gives all of the context necessary. So we can actually peep in and see what it's doing. This was the original prompt that it was given. Create the Juice project structure, gives it all of the information that is needed. And then it goes on and tells it to read all of these files. You can see that it's reading them. I'm going to press Control O and then Control O to go back. You can see that it's now writing things. It's already created the CMake list file. It's starting to write these very basic parts. This foundation process I thought was very helpful to split it up. You're not trying to get it to go, okay, you've got the plan, now go and build it. We want to create the basic structure and then verify, very importantly, that it even builds. So you're going to see in a second that it's going to use a script that I created, because building and installing is another one of those things where you don't want it to deviate. So we've got this bad boy here, the build and install script. This is a real killer, because what it does is it ensures that when files are built and installed, they do so following an identical, and should we say idempotent process, so that it does it the same way every time. Unfortunately, I'm sorry if you've been watching this video all this time and you're a PC or a Linux user. This system that I've built is not going to work for you without you doing a bunch of decent tinkering. Feel free to go ahead and do that. Maybe I could even then merge it into the main repo. If you know, it would be nice to offer this to PC users, but right now my script is set up exclusively to work for Mac users. And also Mac users who use Logic or Ableton. Now you'll see why this happens, but you can see right now, build and install. We've had an exit code 1, meaning it has to go and actually check something else, but you're going to see in a second that the build will have completed. Very, very satisfying. Here's the log file of the build. So if we go in Plugin, Flutterknob, Source, logs, Flutterverb, build logs, you can see why it failed. And then here you can see that it actually did succeed, and we had a success. If we go back, I'm pretty sure that we're about to have this say it is completed. Nice, you can see that it's actually also now creating the continue here file inside of there. While we're looking at it, it's a really, really lovely script that also clears Ableton's plugin database and Logic's, just to make sure that it installs the plugins fresh every single time. That was another issue that I kept running into when I wasn't using this build and install script, is sometimes you make changes to it, and Claude confidently declares, cool, I've made these changes, go try it. And you open up Ableton and the plugin is identical. Nothing has changed. And you then start saying, okay, well, the knob still doesn't work. And you go and make all of these changes before you realize that actually the plugin that you're opening in Ableton is not the built plugin, because Ableton forgot to install it, or it didn't install it in the right place, or didn't clear the cache. So running it with this script ensures that it works the same way every single time. Now, what's lovely is we are about to complete the foundation stage. You can see here that stage 2 is complete. Let's just verify, just to make sure that ideas, I'll continue here. Verify stage 2 complete. Next stage is shell. So I'm going to clear context again, and then I'm going to do continue, and then we'll do continue here, Flutterverb. And it's going to move on to the next stage, the shell. This is where it's actually going to start creating the implementation of, I don't know what this stands for. I think it might be like parameter tree something. What is it? APTVS. Audio processor value tree state. So we're going to actually go and create all of the classes that are necessary for the digital signal processing stage to implement, because it's all very well telling it to write the code. If the classes aren't there, we're going to deviate potentially. So that's why we have this very important agent, the shell agent, who's going to come in and just make sure that everything works, or everything is set up that we're going to need for this stage later on. We're really getting there now. The DSP implementation, as you can see, is split into 4 phases. So that's probably what's going to take the longest. But for now, this shell stage should be pretty quick. I had to undo that because it decided to start implementing the shell itself without using the agent. So I just double pressed escape and allowed myself to go back and just undo all of the code changes. Nice. So it is important, if you catch it trying to do anything between stage 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on its own, you want to stop it and tell it to continue with the plugin workflow. This is probably another thing we need to add in here. Ensure that stages 2 through 6 are always continued with the plugin workflow. Make more explicit. I don't necessarily know how we did that. I actually kind of worked on that earlier. But yeah, subtle bugs sometimes, but we just need to ensure that the shell agent invokes it. Actually, we could say make specifically name the agent responsible for the stage task. Okay, whatever, that's fine. So this shouldn't take too long, but the shell agent is going to then implement all of those parameters for us. Shell agent is done. I'm assuming also that our continue here file has been updated. Let's just check. Continue here. No, it hasn't actually checked that off yet. So maybe the main Claude will do that. Nice. Okay, so it has. It's gone in here. It's updated the continue here file. It's updated plugins.md. And now it should be saying we are ready to rock and roll. I'm going to clear the context again. Oh, also very important is that we are still committing. So you can see we have all of the actual stages committed here with the specific files of each stage, which is just crucial, again, for context, if you want to roll back or any of the other good things that come through version control. Nice, so I'm going to clear context. We are now ready to start implementing the, not context, continue here, flutter verb. There we go. We're now ready to start implementing the actual DSP. And as I said, this is a 4-step process. So this is what's going to take the longest. But this is really, really great. So let's say yes. I need to ensure that the agent handles this rather than it doing it on its own. So let's make sure that it's going to do that. Nope. Okay, so I'm just going to double press escape to undo. I'm going to go back here and restore code and conversation. So continue with plugin workflow. Again, this should be so explicit. I don't know why it's not. But if you don't do this, you're going to end up with some mishmashes and lack of alignment. These agents are specifically set up to handle this properly. So I do highly recommend that you keep it in the way that it's meant to be implemented. Okay, so here's actually really cool. So you can see that it's reading the Juice 8 critical patterns. This, again, is so crucial that we don't run into repeatable and preventable problems. Because of the fact that Claude Code's knowledge, I think at this point actually is January 2025, it is a lot more recent than when it was like May 2024. But the problem is Juice has changed since then. And also there is a weighting, should we say, or a tendency for Claude Code to implement things based off of the knowledge that it has, that it was trained on, which is largely favoring old Juice patterns. And so one of the core things that I kept running into was that it kept trying to put some sort of Juice header file in that just it's not the case anymore. It shouldn't be used. And I had to keep saying, don't do that. So that's why I created this critical patterns file that I think I showed you a little bit before. But it gets fed in as context, patterns, critical patterns. If I search for like header here, so this header generation, always required. It will fail if it is not found. So these things are crucial that it know. That's why I get it to read it at the beginning of any of these actual coding tasks, is just so that it understands, okay, I should not do these things. There's a very, very nice command I've created as well called add critical pattern. Now, I hope to some extent that we have a problem with our plugin once it's actually built. I hope there is something about it that we're not 100% happy with. Because what's cool is we're then going to use the research tool to deeply investigate what the problem is, and then it's going to find the answer, ideally implement that fix in one go, and then we're going to get it to first run docfix, which is going to document a recently solved problem. So inside of this troubleshooting folder is a bunch of things that I've already run into. So for example, individual invisible knobs. Or, you know, when you have a knob and you click it and it like goes to where the mouse is rather than clicking up and down. I hate that. Certain plugins do it, but it's a problem with the absolute knob positioning. So Claude has, or should we say the plugin freedom system has the ability to go and research things on its own on the internet using Context 7, reading Juice docs. But before it does any of that, it actually looks in this troubleshooting folder to look to see if any of the symptoms that I'm referencing are things that we've solved before. This is incredible because what happens is we can actually teach the system. We can learn, or the system can learn from real issues that we experience. And I've only put these ones in here so far because I've only started using this in the past couple of days. But once we build a bigger and bigger library of these common problems, Claude is going to be infinitely faster, particularly with this front matter that means that it doesn't have to read the whole file first. It just reads this to check to see do these symptoms match, and if so, it then goes on to read more. It's also got tagging. It means that we don't have to waste time going and researching problems online every single time when it's very clear what the problem was. We fixed it 100 times already. So yeah, very nice. We can see that also at the end of every particular 4.1, 4.2, whatever these stages are, it actually then goes on to just test, to rebuild, to check that it still builds. Very nice. We can see here that it ran into a problem. So this is actually a pretty good time to demonstrate that. Juice DSP API issue. The reverb doesn't have this. So the subagent used the wrong Juice Reverb API. Great. So hopefully, once this is now done, I can show you the doc fix situation. Because this is great. If I want to build a reverb again in the future, I don't want to have that problem. So I'm going to say doc fix, and it's going to create a document about that fix around the Juice reverb. Maybe I should actually just be specific about what this is. So I'm going to say restore conversation, doc fix the reverb problem you just fixed about the DSP API. Whatever, cool, we'll say that. So now what it's going to do is it's going to run the troubleshoot document skill, or troubleshooting docs skill. And inside of here, it's now going to figure out which one of these folders does it make sense to. It's probably going to be this DSP issues or maybe API usage, but it's going to read the YAML schema that I've got in here. So every time it enters something, it uses exactly the same formatting. What's nice as well is if we tried multiple things beforehand, it doesn't just say what worked, but it says what didn't work. So this was identified on fixed on first attempt. However, maybe something like rotary slide position, what didn't work, there we go. So this didn't work and this didn't work. Nice, we can go in here and we can now see symptoms, no set sample rate, blah, 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 blah. We can see now that, yep, session documented. Now this, it asks, I could do add critical pattern, or it even asks here, do you want to add this to required reading? In which case it will promote a snippet of that and then reference the full file in our critical pattern. So I'm going to say 2, and it's going to shift it in there. Unfortunately, the rain is now coming in, and as such, I imagine the quality of my audio is about to get a little tricky. So I hope that it doesn't get too loud, and I hope that maybe Final Cut Pro's amazing noise removal feature will make my voice sound nice and clear. But as you can see, it's now reading that pattern. It's added this in to the Juice 8 critical patterns, which means any time again in the future we try and build something with a reverb, it's going to add that in there. So let's just make sure to verify that the continue here file was created. Let's just check. Go in here, plugins, flutter verb, continue here. Where are we? So continue here. This, we also need to say plugin workflow needs you to update the context of continue here and commit if you didn't. So I'll let it do that. I'm just going to skip this bit of the video because you don't need to keep seeing me fixing my at times broken system. I've just made a note here to actually create a slash command that will just reconcile the differences, because this does seem to be an issue that doesn't always happen, but when it does, I don't want to have to say, did you update plugins.md, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to create a slash command that just, by the time you're using this, will probably just be called reconcile. And it will just make sure that everything is tip-top as it should be. Nice. Okay, so it's all done. I'm going to clear context, and then I'm going to say continue, and then we'll say continue here. I'm just going to be super clear, and I'm going to say plugin workflow phase 4.2. Maybe I should just make it clearer actually in those files, but I know that I can do that to absolutely put it on the right path. Okay, nice. So yes, yeds. Let's continue. Lovely. So it is using plugin workflow this time. In theory, this means that it should invoke the agent and then commit for us. Again, I just tried doing yes, and it decided to try and start coding on itself. So I specifically told it to use the DSP agent. This is something that, again, I've just added as a note just to ensure that this properly happens. When you guys start using this, I would be very appreciative if you could just reach out with any kind of bugs or any kind of things that you notice don't seem to be working. The more and more people we have using this, the easier it is to improve the quality, because you know it really is stress tested better the more and more people who are building plugins using the plugin freedom system. Great. So DSP agent has completed phase 4.2. Let's just say yes, yeds. Something about my fat finger is deciding to repeatedly put D's before S's. Okay, this time it did seemingly work. You can see that it's actually given the DSP agent its task without me having to go in and redirect its efforts. Bloody wonderful. Maybe you don't know about these agents, but you know how I kept clearing context? That isn't strictly necessary in these DSP phases because of the fact that these have their own context window. So all it's going to do is in here, like the main Claude is going to tell that DSP agent what to do. The DSP agent already has its instructions as well, but it's going to go and then read and update all of the files necessary to implement that. And then it's just going to report back to the main Claude, which means that we actually get to keep a fair amount of space for context. And seeing as I said here, like, yes, use the agent, that means that I can just say, yes, continue, just go, you know, whatever. And it should then just keep rocking without us having to keep reminding it how to do it. Finally, DSP agent has completed 4.3. This is the final phase. So let's just say yes. I'm assuming in post I have cut out these massive amounts of time of me just sat here twiddling my thumbs, looking out the window at the rather beautiful but wet view outside. Awesome. Stage 4 is totally complete. We can see that it has been committed, which means we now move on to the GUI, which is of course taking the mock-up that we created in the ideation phase and actually pasting it on front of all of the DSP and the parameters we've created. So I'm just going to say, yes, please continue. There's really no need for me to be friendly, but as I always say, if the AI does one day decide to take over, hopefully they will remember those who were polite to them. So this is actually going to now invoke the next agent, which is the GUI agent. And I believe, if we have a little look at the plan, that the plan says phase 5 is 1, 2, 3. So this is also 3 stages. So I'm probably just going to skip ahead after having completed all 3 phases so as not to waste your time. And I shall see you shortly. Okay, awesome. Just going to take a little break to show you this. The GUI agent has almost completed stage 5.1, and one of the processes before it does anything else is actually bringing the plugin up. And boom, here we go. We actually have the standalone plugin The VU meter hasn't been implemented yet, that's step 3. But you can see that the knobs all work. The little toggle thing here works. And this is what the plugin is going to look like when we open it up inside of our DAW. So I just wanted to jump in and quickly show you that, because it's always an exciting moment once you get to this point where you actually have something that you can play around with. Very cool. Okay, so I'll see you shortly, and I'm just going to keep completing these stages, and hopefully we should be ready to rock and roll soon. Okay, so stage 5 is now totally complete, which means the only last thing we need to do is stage 6, which is validation, which is where we create a couple of presets. We use Plugin Val as a sort of testing framework to ensure that everything works, and then actually install it inside of our DAW. So let's just go ahead. I'm going to say yes. This is the final stage. Again, I'm just going to skip forward because it isn't really necessary. You can see that all I've been doing is just say yes, continue. It really is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll see you back in a sec. And we'll open this up in Ableton and give it a go. Okay, we are now built. It seems as though, let's just check, is the plugin installed everywhere? There's actually even a command that I've got for this, which is just install plugin. I think it probably is already installed, but let's just make sure. I'm going to say install plugin. That's going to run that build and install script again. I do need to just really tighten up the conversational flow here. Because as you can see, it's kind of stopped giving us number answers. That was very helpful in the early stages, and it seems as though the workflow has drifted a little bit. You can see here that it's marked working, which means all of the tests that it ran passed, but it's not actually built in release mode. So let's just make sure that it goes in and has a look to see how to do this. It doesn't need that flag release only. The existing build, oh, I guess it is already built. Okay, let's go into Ableton and have a little look here. Oh, I guess it is already built. That's part of stage 6. So let's go in and I'm going to see Flutter verb. Are we installed? Does it open? Do the knobs work? Do the knobs control the parameters here? Oh my God, they do. Now what I don't know is whether or not the actual sound will work. So this is the main thing that we need to test. I'm going to just take easy keys. I'm going to take some piano for this. I'm also going to put on my headphones because I don't want my microphone to pick up the delicious music that we're about to be listening to. What do we think? Put down a bet. Does it work perfectly? I'm also going to put the felt piano on. I'm just going to pick some little piano situation going on here. Let's go for intensity low and just find something that seems to be fairly delish. So maybe we'll go for this. I don't know if this is going to be nice. Movie magic. Let's just set the sound of Ableton to come out of my headphones, and then let's just verify that you guys can still even hear this. Yep, we can. Okay! Oh my God, it's already working. So I want to bring all of these down. Just make sure that all of these parameters are at nothing. I suppose that needs to go back to 0. Size, decay, down, drive. Okay, so let's first just test. Does it change the sound on and off? Okay, so there's a nice piano. Let's just turn it on. No. Okay, this is good. So let's maybe just try mix first. Okay. Let's keep this loop going. Make sure that the loop is happening. Okay, so we do have this mix. I'm going to bring this back to about halfway. Let's increase the decay. Okay, so I wonder if decay isn't working like we expect because the size is small and you can't make a long decay. I'm going to bring this back to what its default value is. Okay, so we need to play around with what's going on here. This is where we're going to actually invoke the improve workflow. But the reverb is working very nicely. So now let's bring in this age knob. Okay, so that's at its extreme. Sounds terrible. We're getting a slight bit of crisp when we wiggle the knob. That does sound very nice though. Now let's bring in this drive. So another problem we're having here is there's a bit of latency, probably brought about by the oversampling. So let's bring the drive down a little bit for a second. Also, the VU meter doesn't seem to be working. Let's try the tone knob. Okay, so the tone knob works. Now let's try also this filter here. Okay, so this doesn't work either. Okay, so this is awesome because we now actually have a working plugin that we can now go back here. I'm just gonna do clear, and what we're gonna now do is trigger the improvement flow. So I'm gonna do improve, and I'll do flutter verb, and I'm just gonna do it like that. I'm not gonna say anything else because I'm gonna show you exactly what ends up happening when we trigger this flow. It's gonna back up the plugin, and it's going to create a new version for us. So what do you want to improve? First and foremost, I'm also just going to run the research prompt, and I'm just going to tell it what's wrong with it. The decay knob doesn't seem to do anything when the size is small. My anticipated functionality of this is that even if the size is small, we could create a long decay. I know that's unnatural, but I like that. Another thing is that the drive knob creates a huge amount of latency, likely caused by the oversampling. I'm wondering if there is a way to negate this effect, because when you actually have anything other than 100% wet, there's a real noticeable difference and a big delay between the dry and the wet sound when you start bringing up the drive knob, which is less than ideal. Also, the age knob goes too crazy. It's really at its max most useful about like 10 or 15%. So we need to scale down what 100% is to make it more usable. Lastly, the mod mode switch doesn't work at all. It's just stuck on wet only, and I can't click it to change anything. Also, the VU meter doesn't seem to work. Check. And then I'll say tape age for VU meter functionality. It works there. I'll just show you what the tape age is. That's this plugin. It's similar, a similar design. I asked it to recreate it. So if I show you what this sounds like, this does, let's get rid of flutter verb. Tape age, the VU meter does work. So we've got this drive knob here that's very nice. We've got this age. Lovely. So let's just go back here and I'm going to run this. And this is going to go in. So you'll see how this works. I know I did the improve workflow. That is so that we can get into this flow where it's actually going to create a backup, and it's instead of just making changes and willy-nilly committing, it treats it in the same kind of flow as when we were building it. So it's very helpful. This deep research skill though, this is very useful because what it's going to do is it's going to look at all of the problems I've presented it with, and then it's going to go and search the code base. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to read what parts might be causing it. And then it's a graduated process. So if I go in here, you can see that the deep research workflow, where is it? Skills, deep research, maybe assets, references, research protocol. You can see here that it's got a couple of levels. So level 1 is it just looks, well actually level 0, as it says here in the actual skill file, is it just thinks about, is this something I can just easily fix? Level 1, then it searches our troubleshooting docs. I don't think we have anything relevant to it yet. Then it also does a quick context 7 lookup, confidence assessment of how sure it is of something. Then, if that still doesn't work or it doesn't provide a confident solution, it will then do a moderate investigation where it then goes searches the Juice forum, GitHub issue searches, context 7 deep dive, which is very helpful as well for finding more depth. Then finally, the deep research. This uses Opus, and it goes and it looks to try and find, far more, should we say, resources. I actually haven't had to get to level 3. Most of the time it gets it in level 0 or level 1. So you can see here, it's having a little look to see what's happening. We'll just leave that running for a second. We'll come back and we'll see what's happening. In the meantime, I just want to show you a couple of other little plugins that I made that were kind of nice. So Tape Machine as well. This was before I created the UI. And actually, this one was created using the system before this system. So you can see the difference in how these plugins get created. There's also a very nice one I created called Shake. This plugin I also created before I started doing it properly with HTML, but this was just to solve a problem that I had, which is I was always searching for shaker loops. And it was always just such a hassle to find a shaker loop that did the singular thing I wanted it to, which is to sound like this. Where is our shaker? Did I put it on the wrong channel? Yeah, okay, so here we go. Let's get rid of all of this shit. So it's nice because I can just create these really simple patterns. I created a few presets. So you can keep it just like straight. Then Humanize obviously creates subtle velocity and timing shift. Yeah, so it seems as though Claude is telling us that something is done. Let's go in here. So investigation, 5 issues. All have identifiable causes with clear issues. Decay size. Juice's reverb class couples room size and decays time internally. Small rooms can't have long decay by design. Okay. Drive latency, no actual oversampling found. The latency is phase shift. Age to extreme. Okay, that's fine. Which is now too much. Yeah, okay, that's fine. Mod mode switch non-functional has an issue. VU meter dead. Okay, so solutions use damping instead of mapping from decay. Control decay via time wet signal. Okay, fair enough. Drive latency, apply drive only to wet signal inside reverb path. So this is actually wrong. I know that this is wrong because I just tested it. So use an exponential curve, change from get toggle. Okay, so I'm going to say, number 1, sure, fix the decay independence issue. Number 2, this is wrong. You're wrong. The drive is only happening to the wet signal and it's still creating massive latency. It's like maybe half a second, I don't know, maybe less, but it's very noticeable and it's not what you're saying it is. Number 3, age scaling. Yeah, exponential curve would be really nice. So like I have a lot more range of motion of the knob before it starts getting to extreme. Maybe we still do keep extreme values at top, but make it a lot smoother getting to there. Number 4, fix the mod mode fix. That would be great. And number 5, the VU meter. Also, please fix that. So I'm going to say, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to say 3. You will need to continue your deeper search when it comes to the drive latency issue. But, and I'll just do this. So, but, nice. This is just to say that those parts work. So I'm going to leave that as it is. It's going to go ahead and it's going to do a little bit more research into that. But yeah, so you can see how satisfying it is to be able to create these plugins yourself. I'm going to just leave that for a second and we'll come back to it once it's done. Nice. So it seems to have found the root cause. It's the signal flow order. It captures the dry signal early. So this is fairly interesting because I've noticed this a couple of times when I've been building things, that it seems to capture that dry signal before anything else. And it struck me as being something that seemed a little strange. So let's just see. It's going to do a little search to see how to fix this properly. And then it seems like it's done. It's going to present us with a plan. Oh, I guess it's just looking into the dry wet mixer beforehand, and then we'll come back and have a little look to see how this works. Dope. Okay, so here we have all of the solutions. Now here it's saying it's recommended to use improve. So I'm actually going to say improve all of these. And the reason why you'll see as this runs is it's going to create all of the documentation of exactly what we did. It's going to create a changelog file. It's going to update a bunch of stuff. So you can see it's invoking the plugin improve skill. which again, super critical, is you've gone through this painstaking process of building it to a spec and to solution and making sure that all of these files, relate intelligently and you're not just losing context. So if you're going to improve it, you also definitely want to make sure that these things are following a structured approach. That's why I created this specific improve function. You can see it's verifying that it's installed. You can't improve a plugin that is not finished or installed. Once it's done that, now it's going to continue with just a brief investigation. It's probably already got the context necessary for that. So let's just see what it does. Nice. It already has the solution. Investigation completed via deep research. Yes. Nice. And you can see here that all of the fixes that maintain existing parameters and IDs and ranges, because it's still referencing the preliminary contract. But then it's going to add a patch version where appropriate. So here we go. Which version bump? It's a 0.1. I'm going to say V1.10. 1.10. Because this is actually an enhancement. Actually, no, let's just go with what it says. I'm not a coder. I don't necessarily understand. We'll do V1.01. So we'll do 1. Boom. And you're going to see what this is going to do quite nicely is it's then going to create a backup. So let's have a little look in our folder. You can see in the backups folder, it's now creating the Flutter verb folder with backups. Let's go in here. It seems to have created an issue, which it should adjust. It will change the name of this to something appropriate. There we go. The backup command had shell expansion issues. Yeah, it really did, didn't it? Let's have a little look. This is curious, actually. We should probably save this for later. I'm going to put this in here as a note to come back to because this seems to be something that must be fixed. Okay, so it's going to go in, it's going to make those changes. I could probably also delete this folder now, that's not needed. Okay, let's go back and see what it's doing. It's implementing the damping value. Awesome, it seems as though it has completed all of the tasks. It's updated all of the necessary files. It's also created this changelog file, which is pretty cool. Which means that if you go into the plugin, Flutter Verb, the changelog file lists the change, obviously. So this describes what the file was before, and then this describes not just the changes, but the solutions to those fixes, which is very helpful. We can now go in here. You can also see that continue here has been archived. This is helpful because we don't want to keep working on it. The build was successful, it's tagged it, it's then bumped the version number. And in theory, after this commit, it should all be good to go. So what I want to do is before I close anything, let's just bring it up. Because I haven't closed Ableton, we're still using the old version. So what was it called? Flutter Verb. I'm going to bring this up. We can verify that this drive is creating like massive latency. Age is way too much, mod doesn't work, and also the VU meter doesn't work. So let's just close this, and I'm going to show you that in theory, it should now work. And this just explains how the improve workflow works. So I'm just going to open up this because I know that tape test on piano, I know that I can just easily launch it because I've got some piano chords here. So here we go, Flutter Verb. Will it work? Here is the question. Let's just bring all of these down. Okay, this still doesn't work, which is strange. The toggle still does not work. Let's just check that this other version hasn't changed anything. Okay, so I don't think it's actually put it in the correct place. So what I'm going to do here is just scroll up to check to see the build successful. Can you verify that the version in my DAW is the latest one? it doesn't seem to have actually updated any of the changes that we've described. So this is, again, something that does happen every now and then. Even though my script should have, in theory, replaced them, it then can go and check to see that the relevant file has been committed. So maybe let's check as well to see if, yeah, okay, so the standalone version does seem to work. So the binary was updated. Let's just check if there are any build warnings. So let's go in here and just close Ableton for sure. Let's just let it completely clear all of the cache for sure. This should happen in the build script, but let's see if this adjusts it. Because often what will happen is, although you've updated the plugin, Ableton is still opening the old one, which is a strange characteristic. I haven't fully wrapped my head around why that happens. Let's see. Okay, it's going to do a complete build again, just to make sure. We'll leave that for a second. We'll come back and see what happened. Okay, let's see if this has fixed it. I'm going to go in here and let's just add easy keys. I suppose it would be easier for me to, it would be easier for me to just open up this little example file I had. So take, what was it called? Flutter verb. Now there's only an audio unit, which is interesting, but so it doesn't seem to have updated it again. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to do research. And I'm going to say, it still does not seem to be opening with the changes. The VU meter doesn't work. There's still latency with the drive. The mod mode switch also doesn't work. But now we have a new change, which is that we can no longer see a VST. There is only the audio unit. And that audio unit, of course, doesn't have any of these changes. Do a deep search into why this is. I think it's only fitting that in this video I should run into some issues like this. Because hopefully what we can now do is break through this together and then add that to the troubleshooting document resources and fix this so it never has to happen again. And by that point, the time that you start using this fix should be baked into those troubleshooting resources. So let's see what happened. Okay, so we did just get a fix going here. For some reason, the audio unit and the VST weren't showing at the same time. So I'm just going to say doc fix. The VST now does show. I'm going to do that. Before we go and fix any of these little other issues, I do just want to get it to document why the VST shows. And of course, what's nice is that it's going to add in not just the solution, but all of the things we tried that did not work. So it's created the YAML validation front matter for the documentation fix. So it talks here about symptoms. The VST3 disappeared from Ableton. I've actually had this happen before, and I didn't get around to actually documenting it. So this is very helpful. The resolution was just re-signing and cache clearing. Okay, fair enough. So now it's going to go ahead and create that under validation problems. And I think it's probably worth then adding this as well to the required reading. I'm going to add this to required reading. So press 2. Definitely useful, seeing as I'm always building plugins on Mac OS and I'm creating VST3s. Cool. So I just want to make sure, have you updated the version number with the improve workflow, just so that we've now committed what we've got so far? It's going to go ahead and just bump it up to V102. I guess now, just to make sure that everything is fully committed, because there are still obviously a couple of issues that I want to address, like for example the fact that the VU meter is still not working, neither is this switch. I also tried it out, and even with the on and off here, important to note, it's cool that you can control the things here. This was an issue I had in the past that didn't always used to work, but we did a pretty good job for just like straight up build. Obviously, it's a case of just refinement now and just improving upon that plugin. But it shouldn't be too difficult to get these other two pieces to work. I think probably one of the mistakes I made was then also trying to get it to fix a bunch of things all at once, which, you know, it's probably better to do them one by one. So let's just make sure that all of this is already committed. Very nice. So now I'm going to clear again because there are a couple of issues. I'm going to do, let's do improve. Actually, we'll just do this. We'll do research and then we'll say flutter verb. The VU meter still does not work and the mod mode switch on the UI is not toggleable. The mod mode parameter that we should be even controlling, even if you turn it to on in the Ableton automation section, which subverts, or should we say shortcuts the UI and actually controls the plugin, it doesn't actually control what we would expect it to. i.e. if I have 50% mix and I have reverb and drive, and then I put it to what should be wet and dry, the tone knob still only affects the wet signal. Also, the size knob, if set to 0, the decay knob still doesn't do anything. In theory, we adjusted this with the damping controls, but it's still not working. So in short, the three problems that we have are the VU meter doesn't work, the mod mode switch doesn't work on the UI and also doesn't work as functionality, and the size and decay relationship is still not quite working because size at its smallest basically makes the decay knob work at all. Please use parallel deep research agents to figure out each of these problems individually before you propose solutions. This is another thing that you can do, is that this research is going to trigger the deep research agent. And because we have a few problems at once, it's actually going to launch 3 parallel agents to go and, with a fresh context window of their own, go and actually search for what the solution could be. You can see that I've also set up deep research to use Opus 4.1. Seems to work quite well for when you're doing these deep tasks. So we'll just let that run. In theory, it should now just spawn 3 of these little guys. First, it's going to check the troubleshooting documents just to make sure that there isn't anything obvious, which there is not, because otherwise we would have already fixed it. But let's just see what happens. Okay, after God knows how long that was, maybe 15 to 20 minutes of continuing to debug what was happening, the main issues were the VU meter was not functioning, the mod mode toggle didn't work, the actual mod mode functionality didn't work, and the size and the decay also didn't work. But I'm very happy to say by version 1.0.2, we now have a fully working Flutter verb. We can now see that the toggle works, the VU meter also works. We don't have any of that delay on the drive, which means we can increase and decrease this decay. Maybe a little too excessive there. The age works on the reverb, and what's good as well is with this by default, I can filter just that reverb. If I want to make it darker. And then I've got the wet and dry mode here, which allows me to filter everything, which is really, really great. And as I said, the VU meter is working perfectly. Let's bring the mix down a bit. And there we go. Maybe add a bit more age. So compare on and off. Probably kind of a nice idea to compare this with some gain. So we could probably bring this down 2 more. So here is the sound completely A-B'd. Really, really cool. Now, is this the best plugin on earth? Probably not, but not bad for an afternoon. And of course, really, your imagination is the limitation here on what you can build, and maybe also your patience also. So anyway, really, really excited for you guys to have a play around with it. Check out the Git repo in the comments down below. Download it, get started. Again, quick note, you have to be a Mac user. There's a bunch of things that probably won't work, but the README will explain how to get them up and running. Also, I'm sure I've mentioned it at some other point in this video, but I have just launched a community on Circle. For the first week or so, I'm going to be launching for just $47 a month to join. I'm going to be doing weekly Q&A calls. So if you want any live support on developing and working with this system yourself, then please come join us in the community. It's going to be really fun. I'm just super excited to have a space to just geek out with other AI code plugin obsessed people. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this incredibly long video. Thank you also to Claude. Shout out to Claude for all of its efforts here. You can see that everything is now updated. So I can go here, clear my contacts, and let's go in and just have a quick look to see here. Plugins, Flutterverb, very nice. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I know this has been an incredibly long video, but I shall see you soon. Please feel free to drop in the comments any other further questions or whatever. I hope to see you inside the community.